In Bastogne, winter didn't knock. It attacked. Surrounded by snow, shells, and silence, the 101st Airborne held the line with no food drops, no reinforcements, and no warm beds. Temperatures fell below freezing. Supplies ran dry. But surrender was never on the table. What modern minds call impossible, they turned into a daily routine. In that frozen hell, survival didn't depend on strength. It depended on adaptation. They used socks as filters, burned gun oil for heat, insulated foxholes with ration box. No manuals, no margin for error. These weren't lucky men. They were resourceful. And the methods they used, honed under fire, frozen into memory, are all but forgotten today. You're about to discover 8 battlefield survival tricks used when the world froze over and hope nearly died in the snow. Hit like and subscribe to uncover the tricks that outlived the bombs. Number 1. Blanket vapor traps. Inside the frozen woods of Bastogne, warmth was currency, and moisture was a silent killer. The soldiers of the 101st Airborne didn't just face bullets. They faced frostbite, mold, and rust creeping in through their breath. In their dugouts, even a single exhale could condense and turn to frost on the inside of their rifles. Every drop of moisture became a threat, not just to health, but to survival. So they turned to the only insulation they had left, the coarse wool blankets from their limited supply kits. But instead of wrapping them tighter, they hung them. Suspended over entrances, along bunker walls, and especially near the vents where warmth rose and breath escaped, these blankets acted like silent traps. They absorbed vapor from the air, captured condensation before it clung to steel, and stopped the damp from rotting their few remaining tools. Soldiers noticed that wet air pooled at the ceiling of their dugouts and froze overnight. But once the wool hung there, the freezing slowed. Rifles stayed dry, gloves didn't mold, and even boots, stuffed with spare cloth, remained more usable. Every blanket, once meant for sleep, became a barrier against death by dampness. And it didn't stop there. Some began layering extra rations boxes behind the blankets to catch drip-off. Others used spare undershirts and bandages as secondary filters. It wasn't written in any manual, but the instinct was simple. Stop the cold from soaking through the air itself. This hack wasn't flashy. It didn't make headlines, but it bought time. And in Bastogne, time meant life. It's not always fire that saves you. Sometimes it's what keeps the wet out. Subscribe to learn more field-borne tactics forged in silence and snow. Number 2. Ammo box flooring. Sleeping on frozen dirt meant waking up numb, soaked, or worse, not waking up at all. The cold crept through standard-issue boots and froze the soles of your feet to the mud. Even the toughest paratrooper couldn't fight if frostbitten toes gave way. So the 101st Airborne turned to what they had, leftover ammunition crates. Once emptied of .30 caliber rounds or mortar shells, those wooden boxes weren't tossed aside. They were broken down, flattened, or stacked to form makeshift flooring. Soldiers lined their foxholes, dugouts, and shallow trenches with them not for comfort, but for survival. The crates created a vital barrier between flesh and permafrost. Where earth sucked warmth away, the planks slowed it. Where boots once stuck to ice, now they found grip. And when the skies dropped sleet and freezing rain, the angled crate lids diverted water away from bedding rolls and rations. Some even layered the boxes double thick near entry points or sleeping spots. A few reinforced them with ration tins underneath for drainage. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, and that mattered more than anything. Ammo boxes had been built to protect steel. Now they protected skin. Soldiers joked that the wood saved more toes than the boots did. The dry crates, though splintered and stained, gave one thing the snow wouldn't: insulation. This wasn't ingenuity born in comfort. It was the result of cold that bit through bone, of standing watch when movement meant pain, and of knowing that the battle wasn't just above ground, it was underfoot. Sometimes survival doesn't come from what's brought in. It comes from what's left behind. Number 3. Snow-covered soundproofing. Fresh snow fell like a blanket, soft to the eye, but lethal in silence. The 101st Airborne didn't just fight in the Battle of Bastogne. They vanished into it. With artillery overhead and scout patrols sweeping the woods, their survival depended not only on strength, but sound or the lack of it. They discovered that snow wasn't just a shield from sight. It was nature's perfect sound barrier. Rather than brushing snow aside, they packed it tight over dugouts, bunker tops, and tunnel entrances. Each layer compressed sound, muffling footsteps, whispers, and the creak of wood under stress. A foxhole with snow-packed walls became a chamber of silence. A trench topped with snow became acoustically dead. Even tools, striking metal nails driven into scrap, crates stacked for windbreaks became quieter under snow. The men learned how thick it had to be, where it needed weight, and which drifts held firm. But this wasn't just clever, it was essential. Enemy scouts trained their ears to find life beneath silence. The crack of a twig, the rustle of movement, it could summon fire in seconds. So the snow, once feared for its cold, became their defense against detection. Some soldiers even shaped snow into sound-dampening barriers around their campfire pits. Others built curved mounds to catch echoes before they escaped. And as snow fell again, it refreshed their camouflage, their cover, and their quiet. The cold had taken their comfort, but they turned it into cover. With every packed inch, the forest grew quieter, and with every muted breath, they held the line. Survival didn't shout. It whispered, beneath a world blanketed in white. For more forgotten defenses carved from nature itself, subscribe and stay hidden, just like they did. Number 4. Canteens buried in embers. When winter punished the living. Frostbite claimed fingers faster than bullets. Drinking water froze solid inside metal canteens. The 101st didn't have luxuries. No heaters, no stoves, no margin for error. So they created heat in silence. Not with flame, but with coals. Soldiers began burying their canteens deep beneath ember beds, not beside the fire within it. They wrapped the containers in spare cloth or waxed paper, then slid them under the glowing coals after cooking rations. The canteen sat there like a secret, drawing in warmth without flame. Timing was everything. Too long, and the water boiled. Too little, and it stayed ice. But those who mastered it had something the rest envied. Drinkable water, warm enough to thaw a throat, and keep a core from freezing. This wasn't about comfort. It was about control. In a place where everything, food, sleep, movement, was rationed by survival, having a reliable source of warm liquid was a quiet act of defiance. It gave strength without noise, warmth without firelight, life without risk. Some dug shallow fire pits in the snow, designed not to be seen. Others used burnt-out ammo crates to build ember beds that held heat longer than open flames. In every case, the method was silent, slow, and personal. No orders were given, just lessons passed from one chapped hand to the next. The same embers that cooked their meals carried them through freezing watches. And when the shelling returned, they'd bury the heat and cover the pit. No smoke, no trail. Just warm water in a steel grip, and a soldier ready to last one more hour. They didn't warm the canteens because they were clever. They did it because freezing was the only other option. In the silence of fireless nights, survival glowed beneath the ashes. Number 5, carbine slings turned tourniquets. So the rifles strapped across bodies turned into lifelines. Those leather or canvas slings weren't just for holding rifles. They became tourniquets in frozen chaos. When a leg or arm bled under fire and no standard bandage existed, soldiers looped the sling high above the wound, twisting it tight to stop the flow. But the cold demanded more. The leather strap became stiff. Metal buckles chilled. Turning it tight enough to compress arteries was agony in frost-bitten hands. So they used embers. After campfires died down to glowing coals, the wounded situation required warmth and pressure both. Soldiers wrapped the sling around limbs, then buried the knot end in embers, just deep enough that the embedded heat warmed the strap, made it pliable, and allowed tighter twist without cracking the fiber. That warmth made the difference. The leather didn't snap. The knot held firm. The pressure stayed. Blood slowed. The man lived until help arrived. Some stretched the sling over a stick to create a windlass, turning it tight. Others slipped spare wire or bayonet blade under the twist to reach further tension, all while the embers hummed beneath, silent aid in fire's glow. It wasn't neat. It wasn't comfortable. It was desperate and precise, born of necessity. But it saved limbs. It saved men. Once the wind hour passed, they replaced the sling with clean cloth as soon as possible, but that heated turn was enough to stop circulation loss, enough to hold life in grip while the snow fell outside. And in those frozen nights where bullets struck and frost waited, a rifle's strap became a surgeon's tool. A sling became a lifeline. Even when every hospital shuddered, firebanks smoldered, and hope froze into silence, they used what lay at hand: strap, ember, nerve. Because survival doesn't wait. It makes do. Number 6. K-ration box. Insulation. They collected empty K-ration cans, metal boxes formerly filled with food, and emptied them further, flattening lids, trimming edges. Inside, these boxes were lined with whatever soft material they could scavenge: pieces of wool, bits of spare socks, torn shirts. Then the box was placed between layers of their blanket they slept under, directly against chest or back. The metal held residual heat from body warmth and embers nearby. It became a small battery of living heat. But cold didn't wait. Frost crept in through seams and sleeping rolls. That's where embers came in. Some men would bury the insulated box next to a dying fire, letting faint heat glow through the thin layers without flare or light. Done carefully, the box would absorb that warmth and carry it into the shelter. Placed against cold skin, it radiated slowly, forcing body heat outward to meet the cold, helping prevent freeze. The trick was not in size, it was in placement. Boxes were tucked near core areas: chests, backs, groin. The insulation facing outward was always cloth. The metal side touched the lining closest to skin. This prevented direct contact burn and maximized gentle radiation. Foot soldiers used them when resting in foxholes. Rangers used them under blanched coats. Even radio operators slid them under heavy gear. It wasn't perfect. Some boxes browned from heat, cloth scorched at edges, seams frayed. But in nights when fingers stiffened and breath froze in lines, that little ranged-on tin could stretch survival by hours. One soldier later recalled that a hidden K-box kept his shoulder from seizing in snow so he could reload. This wasn't science. It was scrap. It wasn't theory. It was necessity. And yet, in that necessity lived creativity. When the last embers died, the boxes cooled, but their memory held. They remained pressed against ribs, folded into kits, and passed from man to man long after winter loosened its grip. Because some survival tools weren't tools at all. They were illusions built from what remained. Number 7. Bootlace perimeters in embers. No fences were left standing in Bastogne. No clear boundaries survived the shelling and snow. But when darkness descended, the 101st Airborne built lines no enemy expected. Bootlace perimeters sparked to life among ember glow. Late at night, soldiers would string thin but strong bootlaces between trees and stakes around their perimeter. Alone, a strand meant little, but layered between embers, those strands became alarms. As the coals glowed faintly, the heat radiated upward. Step onto or tug those lines, and the lace would hiss, snap, or spark, alerting the men within. It wasn't about high walls or barbed wire. It was about detection built with what you carried already: cords, lace, boots, and heat. They dug shallow slots an inch deep around their foxholes, weaving laces low to the ground. Sometimes multiple circuits ran concentric loops. The outer loops caught animals, the inner caught human movement. Many lace circuits passed near ember beds, where coals heated the lace just enough to glow subtly, creating visual and auditory contrast. At first, a snapped strand might go unnoticed, but in that smothered quiet, the snapping lace drew attention. Flashlight or lantern wasn't needed. Heat, tension, and sound joined the alarm. Men slept light, eyes half open. One tug and they would know tread had crossed boundaries. Phones, radios, voices were too loud. Lace was discreet. Some lace lines ran under snowpack surface, hidden until melted back from sleeper body heat. Movement loosened crystals and snapped fibers. Others ran between logs or brush behind small berms, so if someone bypassed the outer circle, they tripped another. The lace itself wore out. Frost cracked strands. Replacement happened nightly. Soldiers salvaged spare bootlaces, belts, or kite strings. Even wiring from downed gear joined the mesh. In time, these circuits wove around camps like hidden cobwebs. Silent but deadly effective. The best part, the trick cost nothing but thread and ember. No heavy tool, no spotlight, no clumsy wire. In those frozen nights, the lace alarm was more faithful than dogs. It listened to shadows, sensed movement, and turned darkness into defense. It was survival sketched in string and flame. Because when every footstep could be fatal, your perimeter needed to be invisible until it screamed. Number 8. Cigarette tin signal mirrors. They sat beneath broken sky, snow drifting beyond shattered trees. Yet even in Bastogne's darkness, hope found a mirror. When radio silence was law, when no smoke could betray, the 101st Airborne turned to something small, reflective, and sharp: empty cigarette tins. These tins, once vessels for smokes, were polished by soldiers' sleeves, brass corners smoothed, lids removed. Inside, the smooth metal bottom became a mirror, a tiny beacon in the most unlikely form, repurposed to call in rescue, signal patrol, or confuse enemy watchers. In daylight, a man with a tin mirror held it just so, aiming a sunbeam past ruined walls, across treetops, down snowy lanes. One flick, one flash, crisp and sudden. Enemy eyes would blink, scouts would glance, Allied pilots circling overhead would catch the gleam and change course, but this trick needed perfection. Angle had to be precise, movement minimal. A tilt off by even a few degrees meant the beam landed in snow or hit tree trunks and the signal was lost. Some men rigged mirror holders, broken strips of tin or spare wire to brace the mirror steady. Others used broken rifle scopes or lens tubes to catch the reflection and shape the beam. A cracked bayonet blade might serve as back support. Mirrors were hidden in coat pockets, inside boots, or sewn into pouches. At twilight, when sun lay low, signals became harder. But that's when they improvised again, adding crushed glass or foil lining behind the tin to intensify reflection. Some used tin pieces from ration cans to enlarge surface area, creating compound mirrors that flicked light farther. The greatest risk was detection. A sudden beam might draw attention from distant patrols, so signals were brief, one flash, two, then gone. Silence reclaimed. Only watchers who knew where to look even then had seconds to catch a glint before it died. Allied flyers learned to watch for them. Resistance fighters mapped reflection paths, coordinating safe corridors. In some stories, a single tin mirror in Bastogne saved a squad by signaling their position to a passing plane. The strongest weapons carry no lead. They carry light. Tiny mirrors born of cigarettes became lifelines between snow, smoke, and salvation. So survival in World War II wasn't defined by firepower. It was shaped by fragments of brilliance. A mirror's glint, a hidden floorboard, a whispered method passed from father to son, from mother to daughter, without ever writing it down. The men and women of that era didn't have modern gear, backup systems, or digital alerts. What they had was adaptation burned into instinct. They turned ashes into warmth, broken tins into lifelines, and silence into signal. Each forgotten trick wasn't just a method, it was defiance. A refusal to give in to the cold, the dark, the silence. These weren't soldiers waiting for orders. These were humans engineering hope. And we're here to remember, not with panic, not with fear, but with quiet respect for those who turned nothing into survival and survival into legacy. If this history moved you, if even one tactic made you pause, then don't let it vanish again. Subscribe now, because forgotten knowledge doesn't resurface on its own. It's brought back by those who care enough to remember.